Yeah. All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome back. I'm here in Zoom land with my man, David Thul, founder of Geolumina. David, welcome to the show, man. Where are you joining us from today? You're in a dark room. It's very techie. I like that.
Yeah, thanks. I'm happy to be here. I am in my house in Bryan, College Station, Texas. So I think you're in Houston, right? So I'm just an
That is
hour,
correct.
30 minutes north of you.
Yeah.
Aggie land, I guess they call it. Yeah, so happy to join.
Well, naturally, I have to ask, are you like an A&M guy through and through or what?
I am not. I'm not at all. I'm
What?
not even a little bit maroon. Although I have a great idea for a bar called Marooned, a tiki bar. So we can talk about that later. But
No,
no,
let's
I
dive into
am not.
that. I want to hear more. Tell me about your vision for Marooned.
All right. So if you've ever been to Bryan, you know that there's this the downtown, the main street. There's one lot that's like between a bunch of the old city buildings, and
Okay.
it's empty. There's just like a concrete slab there. And I think it needs a tiki bar because there isn't one in Bryan and College Station at all. And on game days we could do a pig roast, and it just would be totally epic because it could be indoor outdoor. It's already like exposed. It would be totally sweet. So if anyone wants to invest in a great tiki bar, let me know.
Man, there you go. We've already added value to the listeners by offering up an amazing investment opportunity. This is like Shark Tank. So I was going to ask about the numbers and then how much equity you're giving out, but that'll be another topic for another day. So if anyone out there wants to invest, if you're an Aggie and you want to like give back to your community, this sounds like a great opportunity.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. We'll even name a drink after you.
right? Look
Oh,
at
yeah,
this guy. He's such a businessman. I love it.
that's right.
Uh, you know, so let's give a big shout out to our man Ted Cross. He's the one who connected us. So I wanted to make sure I give him a shout out. But I also want to plug Novi Labs. They're up to some super cool stuff. He was on my podcast maybe a month or so ago. And for everyone out there listening, check out Ted's LinkedIn. He's been going super hard over the last several months, posting some very valuable data trends related to the oil and gas industry, mainly on the production side. But again, the way he synthesizes the data and that he graphs it, and it's very digestible for those who may not be like production engineers or reservoir engineers. Again, it's just super valuable. And then it kind of gives you an inside look at what Novi Labs is up to as well. I saw him at Urtech there in Denver a couple of weeks ago. Again, just want to give him a shout out, and I think he's doing a great job, and he's really doubled down on the content creation. So naturally, David, I have to ask, how do you know old Ted?
We got connected a number of years ago, probably 2019 or so, around the time we were founding our company, Geolumina, and probably a little before that. I was working at a company in Austin doing oil and gas exploration, and they just ended up on my radar because of the machine learning and the work that they'd been doing. And my office was very close to his apartment, so we got together a couple of
Ah,
times and shared some ideas and had some discussions. So
awesome.
yeah, that's the nature of our relationship. It's been great. I love watching what he posts too. It's always interesting, and it's
Yeah.
a different take than what you might get from an IHS or one of the Enverus, one of these other sort of groups that goes about it a little differently. So I always like their perspective.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's and that was one of the reasons why I had him on. He started posting stuff, and I reached out on LinkedIn. I was like, dude, I would love to have you on the podcast because that's on my spare time. If I'm not selling drilling fluids, I'm diving into data and looking at that kind of stuff. And so it's good. I can appreciate the level of content that he puts out there for free, which obviously naturally drives it to Novi. Speaking of LinkedIn, dude, you've got a pretty solid following. How would you say? Not necessarily how you got to those numbers, because I think you've got over 8,000 followers, which is respectable. But how would you say LinkedIn has helped you in your business, or has it been more of just a platform you like to engage with people and network? I mean, I'm curious to hear on that.
Yeah, I would say it's definitely more of an outlet for me. It's a place for me to scream into the void.
Yeah.
So I like that aspect of it. I like that there's a I mean, it's become fairly heavily censored over the last few years, but overall, there's kind of like a healthy business discourse, which I think is good. Like I have a lot of hobbies and I have a lot of things that I do outside of work, but I talk about and think about work a lot, and so like there's always something on my mind that's not really appropriate or reasonable or interesting to a Twitter audience or
Uh,
a Instagram audience or something like that. So
Makes
it's a
sense.
great place for me to, like I said, yell into the void. I don't know if it's helped my business. I mean, I get it definitely has, right? So my colleague Steve was in Denver for ERTech last week, and there's definitely like name recognition. Like they didn't necessarily know Steve because he comes from running offshore companies, global exploration,
Mm,
doing stuff like that, and so the unconventional space is kind of new to him. Um, and so he doesn't have a deep network there, but he'd say, "Oh yeah, I work with David," and then I go, "Oh yeah, we follow David on LinkedIn, right?" And so like it
yeah.
definitely helps from that perspective. So
No, it does. And, I think especially if you're an entrepreneur or in sales or really anybody, I mean, at the end of the day, people will go to LinkedIn to scope you out, even if you're applying for a job, and they'll look at who are you engaging with? What are you into? What kind of, screaming do you like to do? Is it, a positive, negative, somewhere in between? Again, it speaks to your character. And so I'm curious, David, you said screaming into the void. What are you screaming about the loudest nowadays? Like what's really got you going?
I think rational energy policy has me going. So
Okay.
I'm an all energy guy. I get called an oil shill a lot on LinkedIn, actually, which is pretty hilarious.
What is
I get
that?
called a big oil shill, like somebody that's funded by big oil and gas interests to be really vocal.
Oh,
Like I wish, man. I wish I was a paid influencer. Man, that would be a hell of a job. I would crush at that. But turns out I take no money to influence on LinkedIn. I don't get paid at all for that. My
I hear
channel's
you.
not monetized. And so like I think so like that's the backdrop, right? Of yes, I work in the oil business, but I think every geologist is like an environmentalist at heart. We all got into it because we love the outdoors, because we like nature, because we like traveling the world. We like a lot of the same things that the greenies love, and I think there's too much divisive rhetoric in our country.
Hmm.
I like the outdoors just as much as the tree hugger does. We show it in different ways. We have different beliefs about how to take advantage of it, but that's okay.
Yeah.
So I'm an all energy person, contrary to popular belief, because what I know is that there is more than 3 billion people on the planet that live in energy poverty. This is something I said on the Digital Wildcatters podcast, but I have to say it everywhere I go. Nearly half
Yeah.
the world's population is in energy poverty, and energy poverty, the definition used by like the World Economic Forum or uh, any of these global entities is outrageously low. It's like you can charge a cell phone and a tablet once a day. That's ridiculous. Can you imagine living with that level of energy and like that's above the poverty line. So now
Yeah.
consider what energy poverty actually is.
Mm. No, it's so, and I'm glad you went there. And I was going to bring that up because I did listen to it. And then for those out there, I'm sure you're familiar with Digital Wildcatters, but David was on, and he did a great job of describing his background, Geolumina. But what a topic you did touch on was the importance of getting everyone out of energy poverty and the importance of gaining access to energy. And so I'm curious, and this is a question that I often ask, depending on who the guest is, but I think I'm curious to hear your thoughts on it. Is have you had any have you had any core beliefs around energy that have changed lately, that you can think of? I mean, and the reason I think it's an interesting question is because we went through this big push, on, say, in the public markets. ESG was a big movement. There was a lot of pushback. Looking at the financials aside, I think it got a lot of companies uh putting more focus towards operating sustainably, mainly, a lot of the oil and gas companies. And then of course it helped fuel more investment on renewable energy, especially for a lot of the majors, mainly European majors. But saying all that, has anything sort of made you step back and sort of reevaluate any biases or any just sort of core beliefs around energy?
Yeah, I think I have two that are really um have been challenged or I've been considering a lot lately. One is
Okay.
I used to think that nuclear was irrelevant. Um Only from the perspective of it's so disfavored societally, right? Like everyone's afraid of a nuclear plant near their home imploding and causing chaos, right? And so I kind of thought, well, that makes it an irrelevant power source for most of society. But I think I guess I now have this wish that we could get over that hurdle, because I think nuclear and fission and fusion and, these sort of, really high energy density technologies are absolutely necessary. I don't see a path forward without them, because
Hmm.
there's so much favorability to low density energy, things like wind and solar, and so like you have to make up for that somewhere, and you see all these kind of nonsense sound bites of Elon Musk saying how much of the world you can run on how small of a solar panel in Africa. Like, he's like, well, you could just put X amount in the desert and it would power the entire planet. And like that shows a very kind of simple understanding of the calculations involved, but not really an understanding of energy transmission and the nuance of how you can actually generate energy and power.
Sure.
So we're not going to pick on Elon. Hopefully, he'll Twitter bomb me in the future for me even bringing up his name. But I think there's such a favorability towards low density energy that you have to offset that somewhere. And
Yeah.
I think should be an important part of the power mix, especially in developed nations with land availability problems. Like if you look at, like, let's take South Korea, right? How are you going to create energy density in South Korea? Every occupiable inch of that country is covered by buildings, right? I mean, it's
Yeah.
it's it's mind-boggling if you show up in Seoul, like there's not going to be a solar farm nearby. But there could be a small scale nuclear reactor, tens of miles away, that would be very advantageous. So I think kind of that nuclear thing is one. And I think I used to think, not thinking about supply chain and natural resources, I used
Mm.
to think that solar and wind um, could do it. I think I used to think that we could achieve this energy vision of bringing everybody up to the level of American energy use. Now you can say about that whatever you want. Energy Americans use too much energy or whatever. But I have this dream that everyone should have what I have.
Right.
Right? They should have the opportunity, the ability, and the access that I have. As just an average person. Like I'm not a wealthy person. I'm not a um, I'm not a global elite. I'm just an average guy from a blue collar family out of Minnesota, and so like I think everyone should have the same access that I had. Like that's a pretty lame minimum, actually, if you ask me. And I just don't see how we can get there with solar panels and wind and batteries. There's just too much raw material demand. Like we have an origination problem in
Yeah.
all of energy, which is you have to make it out of something.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's fascinating, and I'm glad you touched on that one. There's been some really good research papers on and just articles by some pretty, I'd say credible institutes on just how much rare earth elements and just how much mining and energy input going into all that. I actually wrote a research paper in grad school. Shout out to University of Colorado, Denver Business School. I think you went to CU Boulder, didn't you?
I
Or you
did.
were,
Go
yeah,
Buffs.
okay. Right.
Yeah.
Uh so and so anyway, going back, because it was interesting. So going back, and we had it was a team project, team paper, and there was a geologist who worked in Denver, and of course I had all these other crazy ideas about which kind of paper I wanted to do on technologies and all this stuff, and then he brought to the table, uh, he's like, I would just love to dive into rare earth elements. And I was like, what in the hell is rare earth? Man, really? Come on, geologists. Like, that's not cool. And but this is like 2020, right in the heart of COVID. And so you started doing some research, this and that. And I quickly found and realized, like, holy smokes, this is a problem. Like, I didn't realize how much rare earth elements came out of China. The work, just the environments that people are exposed to with mining a lot of these elements that are used for everything.
Yeah.
uh and again, not to dive into the details, but really I think the supply chain piece, and I haven't done enough research to know, and I'm sure some people do have a good grasp on what it's going to take, and you could probably do some modeling and all the rest of that smart stuff that I couldn't do. But the reality is it's going to take an immense amount of material and energy to extract a lot of these minerals and stuff, which again ties into you being a geologist, I'm sure it really rattles your brain on that, just the pure scope of that. So I'm curious, like, if you were to elaborate a little more, like, where do you think the solution lies? Or do you think people are thinking way too short term, like, oh, within the next 5 years, we'll just extract all these elements and it'll be all good? Like, do you think there's a long-term solution to that? Or do you think people are just kind of turning a blind eye and saying, how much can we do now?
uh they're starting too far down the supply chain, so they don't understand the actual problem. So the actual problem is that for all of the minerals and resources we need, whether they're metals or rare earth elements or oil or gas, the reality is that all of the deposits we need to provide for humanity, even only through 2050, have not been discovered yet. And
Mm,
like that's it's crazy, right? So a thing that I point to a lot is that to achieve any of the 2050 climate goals, we would have to mine twice as much copper in the next 27 years as we have in all of human history.
wow.
And that's just for wires and batteries and electric cars and all of the things that fit into one of these climate scenarios. And so that doesn't sound so daunting. Like, we have big trucks, we can mine a lot of stuff. But then if you actually go back and settle on how much copper do we know its location of and is available to be mined on the planet, it's only a fraction of that, twice as much. So I don't know what the exact number is, but
Mm,
the thing about copper is all ore deposits come in different grades, right? So it's basically
right.
how many ounces you can get per ton. And a lot of things are uneconomic. So we might know where there's X amount of copper, but it's at such a low grade that it doesn't make any sense to mine it at the spot price that exists right now. And
Right.
so that's a problem, right? There's this like economics problem. Things aren't free. It takes energy input. There's or I call this like origination costs. They're everywhere.
Mm,
They're deeper than you think. But like let's set that aside and just talk about the timelines, right? So most people don't know that to open a new commercial scale like copper mine is a minimum 10-year process. That's like from
wow.
having well bores in the ground that say we think we have a resource here. And
Jeez.
and like the timelines are incredibly long. They're even longer in North America. Like you might never create a new mine in North America like that. I think there's a new mine in Idaho for something or another that is about to be commissioned. That's what they call it when they start up like actual commercial work.
Yeah.
But it has been in the works for like 18 or 20 years. And and that's almost all environmental review and then legal rebuttals and lawsuits and all of the things that get in the way of creating resource. Like it's not just like, oh, I'm going to go put a shovel in the ground tomorrow and find more copper. It's an enormous process. And so like
Wow.
in all practicality, in the next 5 years, we have to find all of the resource we need for the next 25. And if we don't do that, we're behind. And so let me just say this, we're behind. We're drastically behind. We're
Man,
behind
that's
on oil, we're
crazy.
behind on gas, we're behind on metals, we're behind on rare earths.
Mm,
Like the price crunch, everything has gotten cheaper in the last 50 years because we had abundant resource and abundant workers. That's about to go
right.
the other direction. Things are going to get more expensive because our power is more expensive. We have fewer workers and we have fewer resources to mine that are known and obvious occurrences. So that
Mm.
decreasing price curve that's felt really good and everybody gets to love is going the other direction.
Wow. Sounds like you're giving investment advice, David.
I don't give
No, I'm just,
investment advice.
I'm kidding, man. I'm totally
I
kidding.
just say use your brain.
Yeah, no, but but no, it's a fact. I've never considered that. I mean, I deal in the drilling fluid space, and that's a big topic of discussion is barium sulfate reserves, which are in the next 5 to 6 years, there's going to be a serious problem, which will only just drive up prices. But the reality is, and then to your point, like the economics just don't make sense for them to deploy a bunch of capital to try and find new reserves for barium sulfate, which is one of the biggest components of drilling fluids.
Right.
And so it's a big topic we have internally, is like the supply chain piece of that.
Yeah.
And then, but again, it's just everything we use comes from somewheres, and it doesn't fall out of the sky for the most part. Most of it is, again, resources that are under our feet. And so that is so interesting to think about. And of course we could dive down that rabbit hole even further, but I'm glad you gave some really interesting perspective on that. And hopefully the listeners can think about it and maybe do some of their own research to just further educate themselves on that. So I'm curious, let's talk a little bit about Geolumina, because I think that's fascinating. And then I'd like to talk about AI in general, but you did a great job describing what you do, but I'd love to hear just the famous question in business. What problem is Geolumina solving for the market right now? What's the bread and butter?
Yeah, I love and hate this question, right? Because you have to be somewhat close enough to the oil and gas business to kind of understand the answer. So let me give two versions.
Okay,
Let me give the you know nothing about what a geologist does version. So
perfect.
so that's kind of the first version is so we have 30% fewer subsurface workers today than we did in 2018.
Oh,
And
wow.
that's predominantly driven by a bimodal age distribution that was caused by the 1983-84 oil and gas price collapse that endured until the year 2004. And so between 84 and 2004, there weren't very many geologists coming into oil and gas business or subsurface business. And metals and stuff, they kind of had the same slump. And so that's true for mining geologists and things like that. So a lot of oil and gas geologists are over the age of 55 or under the age of 35. And so I'm 38, so I'm kind of like the tip of the spear between the hump.
Hmm.
Between me and the 55-year-olds, there's probably only a couple thousand oil and gas geologists on the planet. Like that's it. And
Oh,
and
wow.
so those people are retiring, right? The 55 pluses are on their way out. And this is a problem across all types of industries, right? 75 million baby boomers are going to retire by 2030. That's insane. That's in
Mm,
America. Like that's
wow.
insane. Okay, so
Mm,
so let's just get to what we do. So we make computers that see what oil and gas geologists see. So we make
okay.
computer models, AI, that is trained to do the visual pattern recognition that a geologist does. So the best analogy is like a radiologist, right? So I think we've all had an X-ray or an MRI, and we know that it's a radiologist's job to look at that image and identify a feature, a disease, something that's going on inside the body. And you can kind of think of that's the same sort of skill set that a geologist does. We look at information about the inside of the earth and we make a visual decision about it. So that's what we're creating. We're creating artificial intelligence that does that. So what
Fascinating.
do? We turn every I like to think every geologist is like Tony Stark. And no offense to the women Tony Starks, the Tina Starks, they're all out there. But so we're like Jarvis making them Iron Man. That's the idea.
Gotcha. So for those who aren't maybe familiar with the geology space, um, who would typically use your guys' service? And then how, and then I'll actually ask some questions after that, but who are you working for essentially?
Yeah, we're in essence working for the subsurface value chain. So our direct users are most frequently geologists, but they can also be engineers and land people,
Mm,
people that do this sort of like work that's adjacent to it. And so within geology, it sounds like, oh, you might have one user, but there are lots of different types of geologists that do different types of work that all
right.
require different sorts of visual pattern identification and work. So we kind of fill up that chain. And then what happens is you can think of us as like an automation agent. So there are all types of tasks and work that should get done. But a lot of times we get stuck in like the very manual things that are actually automatable. So the goal is
Yeah.
to remove a lot of the manual tasks so that the geologists, the people, can do the uniquely human part of the work. There's like a uniquely human sort of reading between the lines. That is what a lot of geologists do because machines aren't good at that. Computers aren't good at seeing between the data. And
Right.
contrary to popular belief, oil and gas and subsurface actually has relatively sparse data. So that's just something worth keeping in mind. So our goal is to automate everything that's automatable and nothing that isn't. That way, there's jobs for people. We can do the high value tasks that we're good at, and we can offload a lot of the work to computation.
Gotcha. Okay. So I did a little bit of, geology in my geology course, but I've, since then been in the drilling fluid space. So help me understand. So let's just call it, oil and gas company A has a geologist that's looking at, I mean, where does Geolumina plug into? And I know you guys do some different stuff, but like, are you looking at when companies are looking to drill, you look at seismic data and do some stuff, or is it after like in development mode, geologist is using you as like a tool to enhance their output for what they do on a day to day? Like where do you guys all of a sudden then plug into?
Yeah. So we plug in as value creation on top of unstructured data. So it turns out a lot of what geologists do every day is look through information, trying to like collate things in their brain and create these mental models and identify a new resource. So I'm an explorationist, so of course I always see like the exploration side of our product, but there's a lot of infield development kind of production geology, like a lot of there are a lot of use cases over there. But I like to explore, so I like to play
Yeah.
exploration games. So I'll put my exploration hat on. So like a lot of companies, they maybe a company's been around for 50 years. And that means that pre 2000 and probably from 1980 to the year 2000, they have a lot of digital data. I'm using air quotes here, but it's like PDFs and PowerPoints or maps that they created that are digital but not numerical.
Mm,
And so what our system does is it goes through and cracks open all of those files and looks for important features. It looks for the type of um, land, rock formations and things that are inside of that in order to structure them to make them searchable, so that the human can say, "Oh, here's a way that this is like super easily describable." Have you ever made a PowerPoint and then like 2 or 3 quarters later, you're like, God, I know I have that graphic or that picture, that thing that I needed in a
mm.
PowerPoint, but I cannot for the life of me find it, right?
Oh yeah.
And and you can type all the search words you want into your Microsoft search box or Google, and you cannot find the thing that you can imagine in your brain, right? And so a major thing that our AI does is it's found that thing already and has created structure around it. So it's recognized that it's a map and it's of this field and it's this color, and it organizes it visually. So it's something that you can discover very simply because the structure around it was created by the AI. So
Mm.
it's a little bit abstract, and I'd love to show you a demo sometime because I think you'll get it instantly. But a
Yeah,
lot of
no,
what
it'd be
the AI
fascinating.
does is this thing that's known to geologists, which is you can almost think of it as research, right? Like the AI's job is to research and create some structured information that the geologists can easily find and carry forward in their work. It's a little
Understood.
abstract, but
And it is, and it's one thing, man. When I took geology classes, and it's such an abstract sort of field for me to understand a lot of times. Because when I remember like drawing isopack maps and stuff, like old school style, I was like, I just had such a hard time. And then there was like these super creative, artistic folks that could just create these magnificent maps. I'm like, how do you do that? I'm such a binary person. Like one
right.
plus one equals two, not all this other stuff, which again, I have a mass appreciation for geologists because they have such a unique way of like looking things through such a different lens. But, when we talk about AI, it often has some misconceptions. And like you alluded to earlier, I think, and I know I live in this bubble where like everyone I talk to is like, yeah, of course I know what AI is and where the value is and how it's going to change the world and everything. But a lot of people are still kind of like, huh? Chat, what? And so I'm curious, like, what do you think the biggest misconception many people have when it comes to AI in the
I
workspace?
Yeah, I think most people just don't know what it can do for them. They just don't know. They just don't see where the value is. And I think this is like a number of interesting reasons for this. So we've been working in machine learning and statistics and the kind of fields that create AI. That's what AI is. It's statistics basically
Mm,
for more than 10 years now on subsurface. And so like we think we have a pretty good handle on what it can do for us. And I think what's missing is that just most people don't understand how to use it or what to do with it. And it's like any new tool, right? And so what's missing from them is what the application is. And you can go on LinkedIn and you can see some marketer type in a prompt and get 65 cold emails written for them automatically. And like as a human, you'll read it and you'll go, well, I don't really like any of those 65 emails. And well, that's fine. So take 10 of them and edit them. And now you've got 10 emails and you've probably been able to make it in 5 minutes. Now, if you sit down as a marketer and you think about how long would it take me to write 10 cold emails, it might take a really long time. But what people are missing is that just because the AI wrote you 10 emails doesn't mean you just randomly send those 10 emails to whomever. Your job as the marketer is now to decide which one of these emails should go to whom and why, right? And so that is what people are missing about what you do with AI as it sits right now. It's your job to figure out where the application goes, because you can, those 10 emails might be a little bit different, and they might have some targeting twist that you in your own knowledge are able to suss out who the target should be. And eventually AI will probably even do that part for you as well. You'll point it to LinkedIn and you'll say, bin all of these people into different target types, and it'll sort out its own target types, just like kind of ours does with a lot of geology, right? It's pointed out and it sorts target types. It's basically finding A, B's, and C's, right?
Yeah.
This is thing A, that's thing B, and that's thing C. Statistically, these things are alike and in separate groups. And it's kind of the person's job to figure out what to do with each of those groups. So
Gotcha.
it's a little bit vague, but I think most people's misconception is like, where do they come into the equation, and how do they make it work for them? And I think that's really kind of obscure still. Especially, I find ChatGPT to be really unintuitive UI. And
Yeah.
I think that's interesting because it's about as simple as you can get. You write something down and you get something back. But I'm not a writer. I'm a drawer. I'm a iterator. I'm a, I do things a little bit differently. And so like it hurts my soul to just type a text prompt.
I see. Okay.
And that's funny, right? I mean, but it obviously is taken
Makes
off.
sense.
But then you talk to people, and I think I just saw a survey. Something like only 17% of American adults have used any type of AI in their life. Only
Wow.
17%. That's really low.
Yeah. No, it
And they
is.
had like racial breakdowns and age breakdowns and a bunch of numbers that I don't remember, but I was really surprised by some of them. The people
Hmm.
using it weren't necessarily who you think they might be. And
Right.
I think a lot of them are web entrepreneurs and people that are like doing multi-level marketing scams and like doing really interesting things, because when I talk to people that do AI, they weren't at all what these statistics bore out. So like that was really fascinating, because so there's this whole group of
Wow.
people using AI that I don't know what they're doing with it, but it's fascinating. So
Right. They're creating DMs to send on Instagram for hoping to land some
yeah,
sweet lady or something. I don't know. It
DMs, YouTube scripts. I mean, I can only imagine, how much of people's lives are being eaten up by
well,
it.
it's and again, it's an interesting topic, and I think what like things like ChatGPT allow is the execution of like you said, a lot of whether it's content creation, because everyone and their dog is now trying to create content. Maybe less percent of people than I think, clearly, because I would have thought the numbers you mentioned were a lot higher. But I think it lies in AI in general. I think it makes everything somewhat of a level playing field, but the differentiator for success is the creativity driving the AI, which I think the human part of it comes into, because anyone can type in something into AI. And a perfect example, like I don't know if you've played with Bard, but it's like Google's Chat GPT. And I'm a former Canadian and I was nationalized, but come to find out I needed to update my social security card. And so naturally I go online and I'm on this freaking government website and I'm like, do I have to go in? Can I just apply through this form? And it was just like clunky and the government website sucked. I was like, I wonder if Bard would tell me exactly what I need to do. And sure enough, it laid out like step by step. Like at first it was like, congratulations on becoming a US citizen. I was like, yes, thanks, Bard. I appreciate that. And
Yeah.
then it like gave me the best, like the greatest detailed outline of like, you need to go to this website, you need to get this form, you need to fill this out, but you need to make sure this, and that. And it literally laid it out in like 30 seconds. And now I have like a clear, concise, step-by-step path on how to update my social security card. Whereas it took me like 10 minutes roaming around the government website to figure out like what I actually needed to do. And so for that reason, again, totally different than what you do, but like those are things that just help your efficiency on it, like and your productivity on a day-to-day basis. Again, that's like more of like a typical user could do any day of the week. But where I find it interesting is almost companies are now starting to use them as like subject matter avatars within their organization that you can plug something in, and instead of scouring a bunch of documents and technical information and papers that you've maybe written, you can then use it to like, it's like, hey, for instance, I'm drilling a well here, and can you let me know what kind of issues I might run into, and then create a proposal based off that. Like that's where things are going, at least in our type of industry, which is fascinating. But going back to Geolumina, because you do market yourselves as an AI company. I think you've got expert knowledge unleashed by AI on your website. Does it pose not actually an issue, but does it pose a challenge when you're going to market to folks who are maybe not quite like bought into the whole AI thing? Do you have to then explain like, well, look, here's what AI can really do for you? Like, are you having to tell that story often, or do people that you're marketing to and targeting already understand the value?
No, we have to tell the story all the time.
Okay.
And the value story changes a lot, and it obviously changes company to company. I think like any good marketer will tell you that you probably have 100 messages, and your job is picking the right one to tell on any given day. And I think the interesting thing about the oil and gas business is some companies are very, very advanced in their AI strategy, even if they aren't that advanced in their AI implementation. And some are very, very nascent, or they've never heard of it at all. And so the biggest challenge is figuring out where someone is on, their belief system about what this does for their business or what it could do. And it turns out that there's like the simplest use case and the most compelling use case that we come up to over and over and over again is uh, enterprise search and information discovery. So it's all well and good to think that you can have Chat GPT read all of your documents and be a chatbot, an SME avatar, as you said, right? And be able to give you information. But it's not able to do that from the generalized web, especially in subsurface, because there's not that much of our information and subject matter expertise out there. Like if you need help with physics or chemistry, or hell, even probably differential equations or writing and structure, there's tons of language about that on the internet, and it's very easy for the AI model to learn that. And what ChatGPT is doing, it's actually just telling you statistically what's the next most likely word. That's basically
Right.
how the model is set up. And
Yeah.
when it reads enough of the words the same way over and over again, it's actually very good at getting you cohesive instructions, because statistically that's what's going to come next.
Yeah.
And if it hasn't been exposed, so Wolfram Alpha, Wolfram Mathematics, they have a really great article about this. I'll send you it after the podcast. That it's
Yeah,
like
that'd be
it's the
cool. I'll
most
put a link to the show
simple,
notes too.
long but simple explanation of what ChatGPT does. Fascinating.
Very cool.
But so like you can't do that out of the box. And so what we end up doing is there's a gap, right? There's this goal state of, we wish we had a ChatGPT avatar SME in subsurface. And they think, okay, great, I'll just point it to my documents. But the problem is that our documents aren't like web documents. They aren't HTML with block text that sits inside of a body tag or a paragraph tag that's easy to analyze and have structured. A lot of our text is obfuscated in flat PDF files or in very weird document structure layouts that are like daily drilling reports and drill stem test reports and all of these sort of halfway standardized layouts on a page. But when you machine read them, what comes out is just a jumbled mess of words. So ChatGPT can't read those and create language structure, because if you know what a drilling report looks like there might be a column on the left hand side that occasionally has the date typed in, and then there's something in the middle that's about what sort of rock you're drilling through, and on the right there are comments from the driller or the engineer about what's happening. And most OCR approaches will just read those words across the page, and
Mm,
so things will not come out in any structure that makes sense. So it statistically will predict all the wrong words.
wow.
And so there's this gap. There's this gap between the way our documents and unstructured information sit in the oil business and how it needs to be in order to feed into ChatGPT. It needs to be structured. It needs to be reworked. And so our AI does that automatically. So like a big use case that we have at across all different sizes of oil company is analyzing old documents and PowerPoints and PDFs and having models that create all of that structure automatically. So like we went through 400,000 files in a few weeks for a company, and we created the amount of searchable and structured knowledge that they would need to create such a product. And if we had set a team of humans to do it in that same 12-week time frame,
Mm,
the person would have only been able to double click and open each of those files and not do anything else with it. Like it's an intractable human problem.
Jesus, that's
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah.
Huh. That's the rubber really hits the road there.
Yeah. So that was long-winded, but like the baseline value message is 80% of the data in your company is unstructured. And it needs to be structured to be
Yeah.
exposed to the next level of AI and automation. And so if you don't start
Wow.
there, converting all of that old information into something new, you'll never get to unlock the value of all of these new technologies. So our most
Wow.
baseline use case is where we're creating that structure layer that allows everything afterwards. And
Right.
we do it
No, that's
automated because we built our subject matter expertise into it.
right. No, it's when you said 80, I think you said 80% of companies' data is unstructured. Is that what you had said?
Yeah.
Yeah, again, I'm putting myself in the shoes of where I work, and yeah, I just have a bunch of ideas around that. Mainly, again, we have a lot of reports and like
Yeah.
tons, like we're collecting data constantly, but it's like always the question is like collecting data for data's sake it's not valuable, right? But it's like how can we use it to then take it to the next level? So again, it would be cool at some point for us to bring something in to help with that. But anyway, thinking selfishly.
Yeah.
So for you guys then, I mean, what is your guys' vision, or where do you see yourself, with the evolution of AI and the tools and just the growth that you're hoping to achieve? Where do you see you guys in 10 years? Like what does the company look massively different? I mean, what do you see coming down the pipeline or in the future?
It's hard to say because what's unclear is if so a lot of people in AI and machine learning, they talk about there's like AI of doing something, and then there's general artificial intelligence, and that's maybe like the holy grail, and nobody knows if that's achievable.
Mm,
um and so it really depends on, and like we're not machine learning researchers by any means. Like we don't have any PhDs from MIT that their whole deal is making new machine learning. We are in the application of machine learning and AI to our subject of expertise. And there are not that many actually that work in the subsurface. Like, Google does not have a subsurface AI ML arm. They don't do it. Microsoft doesn't really either. IBM doesn't really. I mean, they dabble, right? But like this is all we do. We apply these technologies to our area of expertise. And so how will that change for us in the future? I mean, I expect that we will expand to some other verticals, probably still energy adjacent, because we believe in the value of the importance of the subsurface value chain. So that's
right.
everything from oil and gas, carbon capture, water resources, helium, hydrogen, subsurface mineral resources. So like that's our bread and butter, geothermal. That's where we live. So we see expansion into those different verticals more heavily, but a lot of those clients don't actually exist outside of oil and gas companies right now. For all of the lip service of E&G investment houses into carbon capture technology and sequestration, the vast majority of carbon capture and sequestration is done by oil and gas companies, period.
Right.
You know, it's done in EOR projects, it's done in injection projects, it's done by people that know the subsurface. And so that's our core market. And a lot of that is going to continue to be controlled by us because of our subsurface expertise and data sets. I mean, like, and by us, I mean the oil and gas and subsurface business, right? Like you can't get the data you need to tackle those projects outside of the greater oil and gas and mineral business right now.
Right.
Um, in America anyway, which is probably the most invigorated space for all of that. Now, you know, if you go to the UK or the Netherlands, of course there's public data repositories, and that opens up ability for non-oil and gas and non kind of traditional subsurface companies to work in that space. But they aren't there. Like they're not hiring the subsurface workers. They don't have the workforce. They're missing a lot of pieces in their carbon capture or whatever strategy. So it's a fascinating landscape.
Yeah. No, it sounds like, again, I think there's so much potential just on the growth of, again, more energy demand, requiring more subsurface work, which again, hopefully leads to more opportunities for you guys. You mentioned, I don't know if it was before we started recording or not, but about getting a demo. So if anyone's interested in this kind of stuff, is there something online they can reach out, or something on your website, or what's the best way if someone's interested? Like, I need to see what these guys are more about. What's the best way to reach out, or how to do that?
Yeah, so if you go to www.geolumina.ai, there's
Mhm.
a request a demo button right at the very top. It's bright orange, can't miss it.
Call
You
to
can always
action.
you can always find me on LinkedIn. And like I'm not hard to find. So David
Okay.
Thul on LinkedIn. I'm my picture's in front of a rock. I'm smiling. I look just like me. And so you can
Okay.
find me there. So those are the two best ways we can do a demo. I can come to your
Sweet.
office, whatever you guys like. So
Perfect. No, that's awesome. I'll put all those links in the show notes, and then yeah, if you could send me that, I don't know if it's like a white paper or something on the chat
yeah.
GPT, it'd be cool. I'll throw that in the show notes too if anyone's interested. So but before we let everyone go, and before I let you go, on your LinkedIn, I noticed, because you said you have a lot of interest outside of oil, out of what you do, oil and gas or anything else, but I noticed you offer the service of professional photography, professional headshots. Could you elaborate on your photography passion? I think that's rather interesting.
Yeah, I find that most geologists are also artists, so that's really interesting.
Yeah.
I have been a photographer since I was in high school.
Huh.
I submitted an AP art portfolio. I scored very highly. I actually won a number of photography and art competitions when I was in high school and college. It's just something I've been doing a long time, and
Wow.
on and off throughout the years. So my wife Callie and I, she's a co-founder in Geolumina, but we've owned several different businesses together. And one of them
Cool.
is was a marketing company, or is a marketing company called Avocet Analytics. So it kind of does modern marketing and data analytics, and as a part of that, we do photography and headshots and you know all kinds of stuff, right? And
Okay.
it's fascinating what you can do with statistics and marketing, and how you can really sense the way that your image and what you put out there impacts the reaction rate from people, right? And
What?
there's like this interesting. I don't think a lot of like headshots and photography people talk about this enough, but like feeling approachable in a headshot has a direct correlation to how likely someone is to reach out to you
Yeah.
and be inquisitive. And it's because in a digital world you really want like a human connection.
Hmm.
And so having a warm headshot or a cold headshot or a dramatic headshot really affects the type of people who will interact and connect and deal with you. It's fascinating. So
Wow. So could you, what, like, give me your quick elevator analysis on my headshot. I'd love to hear it.
Let me find it. Hold on one second.
Good, bad, or ugly. It doesn't matter. I'm interested to hear from a professional.
A professional. Yeah. No, I love your headshot. Okay. This is what I thought it looked like. And this is funny. So if you go on LinkedIn and you look at my brother, Andy Thul,
Yeah.
I would say that you guys have a nearly identical headshot.
Okay.
And so that's fascinating. So what I love about this headshot is you're authentically smiling. So one of the things that people don't know is that if you're authentically smiling, you have these squint lines around your eyes, and fake smilers don't have those. And so like the number one cue of if somebody is trustworthy is or like people use this a lot, right? Like you can always kind of tell if someone's like faking a smile because their eyes are
Yeah.
wrong and their face is like really scrunched up.
Yeah.
So like the authentic smile lines there make it really warm and will make people much more likely to react to you. Also the head
Interesting.
tilt. So having like a little tilt on your head and the way you're looking like that gives you kind of an inquisitive feel that lets people want to talk to you. It's fascinating.
Wow, dude, that's
There's a
so
ton of
crazy.
psychology behind this, and like
No,
if
I
you go
love
to
that.
corporate headshots, they're all like, or even
Yeah.
if they're smiling, they're very square on and stern. No,
Yeah.
those guys don't get reached. Those men and women don't get reached out to nearly as much and nearly as often and nearly as fruitfully as people that have a head tilt, even if they're wearing a suit, even if they're fairly serious, even if they're business.
Yeah.
It's not the same as if you have that kind of tilt and a squint in your eye and this kind of glint, right? Like that's what that comes from. So I
Yeah.
love your headshot.
No, again, I appreciate the roses there, and it was totally a random headshot situation.
Yeah.
And so yeah, there was no thought put into it. But when you
Where'd you get
said
it
that,
done?
in my office.
In your office? There was just a photographer there one day, or someone snapped it with a
our
phone, or what?
marketing manager was like playing around with a camera, and I was like, I need to get a new headshot. She's like, okay, smile. And then that's all that was. So it was just literally random.
Yeah.
But to your point, I have, and again, I know everyone in there, a lot of people on LinkedIn get DM'd by like people trying, oh, like I'm a financial advisor and this and that. But I've had some fascinating people reach out to me out of the blue, offering opportunities of like, hey, I'm thinking of starting a company and I'd really love your input. I'm like, what in the hell? Like, you just randomly reached out to me with that. But like, I don't know, maybe that's part of it. But anyway, it's the psychology behind headshots. And I always laugh when people have just a terrible LinkedIn profile picture. It just kills me. So anyway, it's funny. But I noticed your brother. Yeah, okay. I noticed, like you're saying, it's very similar.
Yeah.
Kind of headshot, the smile, tilt, beard, hair, kind of similar. Yeah, it's kind of a funny coincidence there. But no, I appreciate you fill me in. And so if anyone out there needs a headshot, this is your guy.
This is my guy. Or
This
I
is
can recommend a great person in a city near you. I mean, there
sure.
are lots of really good headshot photographers, and a lot of them have it down to a science.
Oh,
A
there
lot
he
of them
is.
don't. But there are a number of people that are very good at it. So I can give you a lead wherever you live.
That's super cool. And then lastly, speaking of AI, this random thing popped up on the screen. Was that you doing the read.ai meeting? Do you see it on your screen?
I do. I do see that. I don't know why it's called read.ai.
I'm not sure what happened there.
It used to have a different name, so I'm not sure why it's called that right now. So
Okay, so that was you did that, or I did that? Because I don't
uh,
think I did.
I don't know. Let me see.
Maybe Zoom's doing some weird shit. Anyway, I'm sure the audience doesn't care. With that being said, again, this has been a fascinating conversation. We dove into a lot of interesting topics. Hopefully the listeners found it valuable. And if anyone feels like this could be something that would be of value for them in their business, please reach out to David, and at the very least, connect with him on LinkedIn. Obviously, he puts out some great content. And for the listeners, please share, subscribe, all the rest of that good stuff. And always remember that everybody in this world deserves access to energy, and we is greater than me. Thanks, everybody.